Hello. I can't hear you.
The audio wasn't on, and I'm sitting here talking to like the ether. That's like the most solid way to start a broadcast. Oh man. Okay, so let's see. Whoops. 1 second. Let me post this on LinkedIn, and then we're good. All right. So today we're going to be hopping into, let me share my screen here. I'm going to be hopping into, I didn't share it. Hold on. So, there we go. All right. So we're going to be hopping into GitHub, the TrinoDB charts pull request. And this one was around, here we go, adding the JVM configs. So I guess currently there's a bit of a bug supplying the additional JVM. So JVM, for anybody who's not really familiar with the Java ecosystem, is Java virtual machine configurations. And so these are configurations, if we look at like Trino docs and stuff, if we are going to deploy Trino, one of the files that we can kind of provide is this JVM config. And so this are these kind of like, as you're running the Trino process on each Java virtual machine or each node, it will basically add these different properties. So this would usually be in a JVM config file. For the Helm chart, again, we're doing the Helm chart again like we did last week in the last Trino Tuesday, where we were looking at ingress. Again, now we're looking at a separate file. So this is going to be the JVM config file, and that we're going to be ultimately editing. And so these are adding in these extra JVM config files. So I don't know. Is there anything else that we should probably mention as a precursor for people to understand what we're talking about here? Cool. So, and hello, my data journey. I think we saw you on there last time. So thanks for joining us again. Okay, so without further ado, this is going to be a pretty fast review. There's not too much that's gone on. So what happened, this was back in last kind of reviewed last November. There's been a couple changes, and then we're basically, I think we're waiting for Joshi or Shubham to basically do the CLA signing. But outside of that, let's see how far along this is and if there's any recommendations that we give. So
we could summon the CLA, but to recheck if the CLA has been signed, you can mention it in a comment.
Okay, yeah.
Just add CLA -bot.
Okay, -bot.
And recheck.
Right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's going to fire immediately.
Yeah, let's see if that. Let's see if he's been added. Maybe he's still waiting for us to set this through. So, CLA bot should come over in just a short time.
Mm-hmm.
All right. All right, and then yeah, let's hop into the code here. So essentially, this was saying that this config value. What is this config value coming from, though? Oh, this is up here. So this was being set. Oh yeah, range values coordinator.
It was iterating over additional JVM config. So the issue that he was trying to solve here was confusion between having additional JVM config defined as an empty object instead of an empty list in the default values. But after Ashar's review, Ashar suggested to change this, so to use neither a list or an object, but just plain text. So that's why he's changing this to include plain text.
Okay. So basically, whatever you end up having inside of here in his example here, adding this kind of plain text, or no, sorry, this is a list, right? And so it's a list of strings.
Quoted strings, yeah, a list of quoted strings. The quoting is kind of important in YAML, so
okay,
maybe we should call it out.
Yeah. So where would we? So I guess for this though, if we're trying to make that a part of a config, should it be like adding these in a default file like we did on the previous one? So like inside here, instead of just having this quote here, maybe having a couple his example here, taking this and putting that into quoted out kind of samples in the default config, right? In the values.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
The problem with the commented out default is what to choose as the default. Like it needs to be common enough to be considered. A good example.
How about we just do like XMX and have whatever the default is already, and just have that being shown as like this is how. Essentially, we're just trying to show like the correct formatting, right? Like
I know, but like again, XMX might not be the best example because it might be probably defined in a different place. And if you include it in the additional JVM, not only that, but like it might be confusing to people to see it in additional JVM config properties when it's like one of the main ones, like the most common one.
Yeah. What about? I mean, because what if we took any of these though? Like, so I remember
you just need to check if any of those are already set in the JVM config.
Right. This one is. These are already set. I think this one is the current, like, kind of pretty close to the default that's already in there.
Yeah, so I would avoid using anything that might be confusing.
Got it. What does he use?
The one what he used. Yeah, this might be actually better because like this is a
just an opening of a JM export, right?
Example. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, some people might want to do that, some not. Like.
And we could. Why don't we just put it specifically in the comments there too? Like this is. Can you? Is it pretty standard to like add comments into, to kind of explain things and.
Yeah, usually you have commented out sections in the default values that you can comment out.
Okay.
You'd probably want to copy that into your own values, but some people start by copying the original values YAML file and start, removing things that they don't need.
Okay.
And end up with their own override.
All right. So this one, let me see. It looks like these are pretty much the same in both the worker. Let me see. Are these all the exact same?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just go ahead and add that then here. And we'll change this to having I think keeping the default being this, uncommented, and then basically just having like basically all of these.
So that's another tricky part. If you want to switch from a single line string to a multi-line string, you'd start it with a pipe symbol. To have a multi-line string. Yeah, so like you would have to basically, like I would copy the whole key into the comment. It's kind of it's starting to go out of the scope of the PR. The first thing I would check is to see if to ensure that we're being consistent. So just to see if there are other parts in the value, like existing parts that would have comments like this. Okay. Actually, that was my first thought when I saw Ashar's comment. about switching from a list to a string. I just thought, are we being consistent? Do we already use strings in other values? I'm trying to open that in the browser just to see.
Okay.
So we use a multi-line strings for rules in access control section. Just browsing through the values. Yeah, not a lot of that. Yeah, so we don't really have any other examples like this
where it's multi-line string. I mean, should that be the standard though?
So that this spawns a discussion. Is this like what's going to be the end user experience? What's easier for end users to define? We don't need to be processing those properties in any way. So having them as plain text, like a multi-line string, is okay from this point of view. The only argument I can see is the issues with defining multi-line strings in YAML, what I mentioned. So like you can start with a pipe character, but there are modifiers that change how YAML parsers are handling new lines. And like, so if that's, so there's a dash, you have a pipe and a dash. I never remember what like those different modifiers. So there's a dash, there's a greater than sign. So I usually just open some YAML help page on the internet, just check different modifiers. That's an argument for using a list, because you define a list in a single way. But it can imply that we're doing some processing over those properties, and we're not. And we don't really care how you define them. Like it doesn't matter if you preserve indentation or not. So any multi-line string is okay. So we're probably overthinking that, and that was Ashar's argument, that defining this as a string is simpler. But again, I'm just going to keep bringing up consistency. So right now in the values, we have all other properties defined, like all other additional properties like node properties, config properties, log properties. All of them are defined as empty dictionaries. And let's see how they're being used in the template.
Let me actually go in. So let's go into templates.
I had to search that because it's not. It's in the config map coordinator template or config map worker. So yeah, we do iterate over them. So like this doesn't only apply to the additional JVM properties. So it applies to all the properties. So we probably should ask the author of the PR to either fix all of those, because if we would merge this as is, it would introduce an inconsistency.
Okay. Yeah, because essentially that's what we're doing here as well. And so this becomes a larger PR, right? This becomes kind of like not only are you fixing. So
and it's also a breaking change, because if you're already using this chart and you're defining those properties, you would have to change how you define them in your values. So you have to be aware of that when you're updating the chart.
So should the recommendation then be actually that we do a separate PR off of this?
Yes, I would just fix the immediate issue, the original issue of having a wrong default in the values YAML file, just to avoid introducing breaking changes, and then we can work on a PR that would make it consistent and simplify this.
Okay, that makes sense. So why don't we, in that case, I'm going to create an issue first, actually. Let's create an issue that, wait. Where is, How do I create an issue?
So we don't have issues enabled in this repository because we want to use the Trino repository for tracking issues in the chart.
Okay.
Just to have fewer places that maintainers need to look.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for letting me know that.
And this is also inconsistent across other repositories because we don't do the same, for example, for the Trino Go client.
Yeah.
And let me check the Trino Python client. Maybe just because we have more traffic there. Yeah, so they have their own issues. We also have like we have a repo like Docker images that doesn't have issues enabled. So probably all the smaller repositories don't.
That's something. Issues. That's a good point that we should probably get some sort of consistency going there.
There should be a contributing doc here. I mentioned this last time. Like if someone would be surprised that there are no issues, there should be something in the README saying where to post issues.
Got it.
Where to report issues.
Got it.
Maybe this written there. Let me take a look.
Maybe what?
So the current chart README doesn't say where are we supposed to be reporting issues.
Yep, that's another thing we can bring up.
And the chart doesn't say so either, because sometimes those metadata sections in different packages include a section like this, like a URL for reporting issues.
Let me see. Yes. Not inconsistent. It's actually not inconsistent yet. Fix. Yeah.
Okay. Fix default values. Fix defaults for YAM lists in values. I would say it like this. In values, the values YAM is a specific term in charts.
Oh yeah, YAM chart. Is that what you're saying?
No. Again, fix defaults for YAM. Without YAM. Fix default for list or just additional properties. To be more specific, additional properties in values.yaml. Yeah, and this doesn't have to be a full sentence, so you don't need the dot at the end. I mean,
I'd have it.
Those are the rules.
Yeah.
Same as in comment messages.
Node. Let me point this out from Ashar's comment over here. So Ashar, this should be fixed instead. Link as mentioned. String. Oops. Let me just remove that as char. No. Okay, and then we'll rather address this in I always forget, what's the shorthand when you're referencing? Is it just like trinodb /charts?
If it's in another repository, maybe that's going to work. Like, let's see in the preview.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. Cool. I just paste the URL if it's in a different repository.
Yeah, base URL and then just the number. Yeah, okay. Rather than address this, we should address this in a separate is a breaking change needs to be applied to all additional properties. Cool. And one example.
Yeah, so like mentioning backward compatibility is important because we can introduce a new way of defining those properties, but we can also go out a little bit out of our way and make sure that the old format still works. Like if you would, so we wouldn't be advertising defining them as a list, but if you would do that, that might still work because why not, right?
Yeah. Okay. Then I'm going to also put values additional node properties, and we'll copy this one. Additional node properties. Default. So template. So use YAML. Moving to this template, and we're going to try to move that to, where's the exact setup that they had here for the JVM? Oh, wait, no, this is the current one. So we would use this. And oops. I just did this for additional JVM config. Here, let's do this on additional JVM config. Additional JVM config. Okay. And then we want to move this to just being this. Cool. Okay. Yeah. Let's look over how that looks. Okay, so this, or I should say change this to. Right, does that look good?
Yep.
The example of how and where we're changing it to. Okay, so let's go ahead and submit that. And then I will use this now to go back here and reply to this and say, let's see. Quote reply. It seems like we're doing this across board or across multiple additional properties files, changing setting additional property properties, additional property settings, figs. Changing this is a breaking change that we should likely only do
I mean, we can just avoid making this a breaking change, right?
Yeah. Let's avoid making this a breaking change now, and we'll filed. This to is this change. looks good. Should I just add, so I'll tag the author. And yeah.
So it would be nice to check with Ashar because he requested this change.
Fair enough. Yeah.
And just to avoid going back and forth with the PR.
Change it back. Change it. Yeah. Sure. Are you okay if we go back to the version and merge this change? And here we'll change to this. The this. Okay, there we go. So this is another one of those examples, and kind of getting back to what we're trying to showcase with this is like, I think this is a good example of like, seeing one thing that when you're just looking at the file changed, it's easy to get a laser focus into what's going on here. And so kind of what you mentioned, Jan, is like, take a look at how you're doing other things and consistency. And that's like, luckily the charts is a pretty small one, so it's actually good to be doing these reviews. But I think that having something where, even when you're in like the Trino repository, Trino proper repository, being able to try to look at other ways that things are being done and kind of like similar connectors or similar properties, or depending on exactly what you're doing, try to do your best to find out if something has been done before. And if you're not sure, you can always like reach out to somebody on Slack and just see if somebody can kind of give that context to better understand something, because that's really the kind of stuff that actually gives a lot of help for these types of reviews.
In Trino, we have a lot of linters and checkers used, so it helps a lot with figuring out where you might be inconsistent with the rest of the code base.
Yeah,
they don't have a full coverage of every possible piece of Java code, but they help a lot. But still, sometimes like things are being pointed out in reviews. That applies especially to tests, I think, because tests are very making tests readable is very important, and I don't think we have a lot of automated tools to check tests. For example, Trino uses 2 different testing libraries. One's deprecated, but it might not be obvious at the beginning, especially if you're looking at existing tests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes I've also found that where it's like if I'm using something outside of that. Let's see. So I got a couple comments coming in here from Evo. Having more than a way to config something in a Helm chart. This is usually when you realize that the Helm chart is a bad idea, designed for small things only, but the whole industry uses them anyways.
Yeah, I fully support this comment.
Let's see. He continues, having more than one way to config something in a Helm chart. This is okay. This was duplicated, and then yeah, I'm glad that you found this one helpful, Ivo. Yeah, I think the big goal of these things really is it's not specific. I mean, part of it is actually that we are getting things moving on the Helm chart, because there are a lot of people that want to see more adoption and momentum in the Helm chart, despite the flaws of Helm as a tool. So we want to make sure that people are seeing that there are efforts underway to making this a more adopted by the community thing. But that being said, I want this to also these sessions to really help kind of make make a lot of the, kind of methods, or I think there's something that like none of us really get formal training on, which is like how to do a proper pull request review or things like that. It's kind of something that you learn by seeing others do it. And so I think that, having some place like this where you can kind of look and learn what are the things that I need to be looking at, what are the things I need to be thinking about when I'm specifically working in the Trino project, and what are, kind of prompts or kind of bad smells to the code, right? This is how a lot of them say, like, there's a funky smell to this code. I need to investigate more as to why, just to give you a kind of sixth sense or kind of an extra ability to hone in those skills. And so I, to be quite frank, like even since I've been out, I've been doing like, developer advocacy work. It's I can tell I'm falling behind a little bit in my review skills, right? And so even having Jan on here has been kind of like, oh yeah, these are very good points of things that I haven't done in more recent. Most of my reviews are involved in reviewing human words versus code words. so it's been a whole different modality in terms of the things that I'm looking at. But yeah, a lot of this stuff, I'm glad that I have you on here, Jan, because I probably would have missed a lot of stuff in teaching people anti-patterns of what not to do. So anyways, so that's, I think that's pretty much all we need for today's, from the review standpoint. So we have like a couple more minutes left over on this, Jan. I was just kind of curious, what's going on in your world on the Trino side? Like, we could talk about Lone Bunny, or we could talk about maybe a couple other things that you've been doing from the testing suites. I'm down to just kind of chit chat now.
So I don't think there's anything major happening right now. I can check my PRs in Trino, though I don't remember that I got anything merged recently. I finally I worked up a little bit of interest in doing more work in the Trino storage connector. That's a third-party connector outside of the Trino repository. Yeah. It was started by Yuya, that's currently a Trino maintainer, one of the Trino maintainers. But this is an experiment on on different ways of reading single files with using Trino. We have a lot of work queued up in here because I keep this up to date. I just yesterday I bumped it into the latest release, so 4.06. That was released. This is the latest Trino release, so this is up to date right now.
Nice.
And we were planning on. So we have two kinds of things to do here to keep extending this. Either adding more file type support. For example, I have an open PR for adding Parquet. Currently, it only reads ORC and from the Hive, like typical Hive formats. And there was a bug reported yesterday about reading ORC files from remote sources. So that's not, we haven't had this covered by tests very well. So we're fixing bugs here. We can be adding more file types, but the most important thing to do here is try to leverage the polymorphic table functions, because currently we use this kind of hack where you can specify the URL or URI. I always mix those two as the table name.
Yeah.
And this has big disadvantages of that. It requires quoting, and it doesn't. Yeah, like you cannot really pass any additional parameters to this, and so like sometimes a simple HTTP URI is sufficient, but we have so many ideas of how to extend this. A big part of reading single files like this is doing schema introspection. So when we're reading CSV or JSON files, we have to basically figure out the data types of the data that's contained there. Those are schemaless formats, so they don't include any kind of schema. And we usually don't want to treat all columns as strings. We want to treat numbers as numbers, like integers or floats. And so we want to do a little bit of schema introspection, and you can do this in different ways. The most naive way requires reading a piece of the file or the whole file. But this implies reading the file twice, first to figure out the schema, and the second time to actually read the data from it. So it's not optimal. And if we could create a polymorphic table function or just a table function to read files like this, we could allow adding additional arguments for specifying data types of particular columns to avoid doing the schema introspection, to make it quicker. That's one thing, and possibly make it more robust when the schema introspection would fail to properly detect a type, maybe in some edge cases. So yeah, that's a big thing. And if we would manage to do this, we could start working on creating a PR to add this to Trino. And that would be awesome to have PTFs for reading files in Trino.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think what's really great about this, and I've gotten really excited about this, is like, we've recently added obviously these things all the way up to this running fault tolerance workloads that are very resource intensive, that need like fault tolerance execution, right? Like that's like the kind of large scale things that we've pushed Trino into, because before it was just, I need to run short interactive bursty kind of queries, not these kind of long running things. But then if you think about so I always thought about like Trino as kind of the middle of like an analytics workflow, is like, you need to have the human in the loop, and they're checking out different data sources without having to move things around. But then whenever it came time to do the real like heavy lifting, move it on to something like Spark or some other kind of big thing. So we've moved Trino into kind of being able to handle a workflow starting from interactive querying across different data sources to making that a more generic ETL, maybe like larger scale. I know you don't like me when I use large word scale, but when you're dealing with
in this context is fine.
Yeah, but when you're talking about like just larger amounts of data, right, larger volume, then you're usually needing to move it onto something that can handle something that needs more resource availability, or that in the case of running out of resources, there's a way to kind of schedule around that. And so that's what we did on the one side. But then, okay, like what about people who literally are just like not dealing with kind of this giant, I don't know, set of federating queries across all these different spaces, right? And we've seen a rise in kind of like local analytics, which is kind of the DuckDB type stuff, where people want to be able to have this option to run kind of like joins on a CSV file that's sitting on their system. Even just to be able to do that in the first place is kind of cool. Having a full SQL query engine that can talk to a CSV file and do some sort of schema inference, like you were saying. But then to go a step further from there, right, and being able to say, well, now you can actually join multiple files across your local system. You can not only can do that, but then you can join that with real, eventually, as you start to creep into, real systems that you want to connect to, let's say a local or a remote S3 destination. And now you can actually just ad hoc have some CSV file that you downloaded from the internet on your computer and join that with some data sitting in S3 without really having to do too much heavy lifting there. So I think that's kind of what gets me excited about this, is that it's bridging this kind of early part of the workflow when you're just playing around with different pieces of data, even locally on your system. And then that will slowly bridge the gap to people being able to, do some sort of fun machine learning stuff or toy stuff on their laptops. And then that kind of builds up into, the traditional thing that Trino's been used for, interactive analytics over multiple systems. And then you go even further, a step further, and just, getting that all the way up there. So I see this entire workflow being more and more covered from end to end by Trino as the query engine, as a primary query engine, and being interoperable with all these other tools, right?
What I like most about this idea is to like I think it's underappreciated how much coverage the Trino's SQL dialect has.
Yeah.
Like I mean, how like the set of functions that are available and the different, I don't know how to call it, like SQL operators that are implemented. So I always thought that PostgreSQL is a very good dialect of SQL. But once I started working with Trino, I was really amazed because like it really has everything you need to do some nice analysis. And like this is like a third use case for Trino. So it's not only big data and federation, it's actually just using SQL for just the sake of writing SQL queries. I know it's not very popular. Like there are not a lot of SQL fans and people try to abstract it away. But I think it's just because we don't write too much SQL in general. And Trino could change that a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that in general, right? Like everybody's seen this thing where they're like, they want SQL to go away, but it's just not going to. And I think the reason why is it's the best pass out of declarative language that has been massively adopted, right? So like at the end of the day, it's a standard less than a language even, really, right? Because there's a million variants of the SQL language, I would say, and it's more of just a standard that has been mass adopted for.
Well, it is an ICO standard.
What's that?
It is it's like ANSI standard, so it's standardized. Like implementation can vary, but.
Yeah. So quite literally, it's a standard rather than even just, I think of it more as that than even a language, right? Because Trino has its language that is based on the ANSI standard, right? Instead of saying like SQL is a language, right? So, I think, if you say Trino SQL is a language, that makes even more sense, right? So having that ability though to run Trino SQL or press, all these other types of SQL on these kind of generic file formats, and the fact that we can just keep adding things to this, right? You have HTTPS file, S3A, HDFS, org, Parquet, like all these different file formats that we're supporting, and different protocols that we're supporting with that. I mixed formats and protocols, but anyways, you know what I mean. So you have all these different methods of accessing these files, as well as the different file types themselves that we have the ability, and then also the ability to introspect. It's like having that is going to be, I think, a massively useful tool even at a low scale now, right? Trino's traditionally been posed as a like large scale thing, but eventually you could even have Trino be like a more generic language that you could just use across multiple different kind of use case. Not the use cases. Yes. What am I trying to say? Multiple different scenarios, usages. So.
Yeah, we should not be limiting ourselves to a certain scale. Because why not? Like Trino is an excellent engine. Yeah. So let's just use it, right?
Yeah, and I think in general too, like just having the ability to have there's so many things out in the world that are just modeled as CSV files, and if I could literally just download like 2 CSV files and have some way of like doing a join between them, like that's huge, right? It's
fortunately, I keep track of different tools that will allow you to do this, and fortunately there's a lot of them. Maybe we don't have to go through all of them right now, but they always vary with different in quality and their feature set. So sometimes you're gonna end up having to convert the CSV file to something else anyway, just to be able to read it or re-import it into another database that you're familiar with, and that where you can do the actual analysis. And that's just another unnecessary step. The whole point here is to be able to do an ad hoc analysis.
Yep, absolutely. And so it's ad hoc not only for thinking big, right? Because everybody's thinking ad hoc is like, to do that on big, large volumes of data, right? But ad hoc can even be, hey, it's just easy to simply, scan this I don't know, 4 megabyte file or size.
Yeah,
file.
you can start with a 4 megabyte, like a single file that's a part of a larger data set, and start learning its schema and writing some basic queries before you run this on a larger cluster. Maybe you can be working in a team in parallel, and you start writing queries and someone else starts preparing the whole data warehouse or something.
Yeah, because then at this point you're getting a lot of the syntax errors and a lot of the correctness out of the way.
Yes.
But then once you actually push it into larger data sets and having more variance to the things, that's when you're going to get a whole different set of problems. But you can on a small data set, you can almost get those two separated, and you're not driving up like cloud costs and all this other stuff to run these like large things on a separate cluster. You can do all of the kind of initial workloads on your local laptop.
Mm-hmm.
And this also gets to another thing too, when we're talking about local, right? It'd be even better, right, if you didn't have to spin up a whole server and client to do all this stuff. And this is where, Jan and I are trying to look into this thing we're calling Lone Bunny. So kind of like the Lone Ranger, but Lone Bunny. And it's like, I want to get to a point where you could have like the CLI and have kind of a standalone mode, kind of like what Spark has, where you basically just give an option in the CLI that we have already to basically say, hey, I want to run standalone, don't connect to a server, just run a individual query like with this command, right? And we have a thing that can take a command, but it still needs a server on the back end. So being able to literally just, ad hoc spin up a query every single time I'm running it. Trino run times. I mean, how you actually know this better than I do right now, Jan. What are your typical, when we take off some of the extra like plugin loading and everything? What's the spin up time if I were to run a query?
Yeah, that should be a few seconds. So there's a lot of overhead. This is not ideal, but I guess it's usable. Like I wouldn't recommend it for production systems it's not a Lambda function.
Right.
So, but again, it might just work in an ad hoc analysis. That's the point.
Like you're running it on your own system, you can wait like a couple seconds for Trino to start up, run, and then go back down, right? That's essentially.
Yeah. The whole point is to make it easier to run. So like when I was starting with Trino, when I was starting to think, how can I analyze a set of files? I remember there was just so many things to grasp. Like okay, I know I need to put my files in an S3 bucket. But what's next? Like I need some metadata server. How do I do that? Like even if I decided to use Glue for that, so another managed service so I don't need to run any other servers, I just need to set up all the authorization, and maybe I don't want to give it my most like my keys that for the super user, for the root user. So maybe I do want to limit it a little bit, and it's just it's not hard per se. Like there's a lot of docs around it, but it doesn't really build up your confidence when you're just trying to run some queries, and now you're ending up in the AWS console and stuff like this.
Yeah. I literally just want it to be, you download the artifact, you basically put in your query, you point it, you basically have to have a setting, right? Which if you download the artifact with some prefix settings, and you can just basically, I guess in a polymorphic table function, if we were to make those, to build on there, you have a polymorphic table function that you would just point to some directory locally with some CSV file, and then start writing SQL queries on it. Like that would be and you could do that if we're doing schema introspection on these files, right? You don't need a metastore to have to store all these things. You can literally just point it with the storage file and start writing Trino queries within however long it takes you to download, and then put the query together, right?
Yep.
And if we give you a sample query and sample data, it's literally like however long it takes you to download, and then copy paste it into your terminal. So like that's, and then you can start kind of playing and experimenting from there, right? But that's really, I think, the dream in my mind of like having that first experience with Trino, being totally unencumbered by all of this like this volume scale stuff that we need to, handling everything for production use cases, right? Like I think we need to get a little more excited and develop some more time into like the fun local use cases, because I mean Trino's it's a fun engine to work with once you're working in it. And so to get that,
and it's so easy to extend.
It's exactly so easy to extend. The SPI is, I think, I almost wonder at some point, like we should make the SPI a very like a spec at some point, right? And that could be the thing that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is a.
It is a spec, but I mean,
yeah,
a formalized, in writing.
That's a totally different discussion. But you did remind me that I have a PR open. That's maybe I should try. To push it through.
Can you share your screen?
With
I know it's just if you can do present. I don't know if you have the permissions already set up, but if you can share your screen, I can pull it up. I know which project you're about to talk about, and I think there's a lot of cool things we may even dive into this one more next on another Trino Tuesday next week. By the way, I will be trying to bring Evo on, and we're gonna figure out another PR to dive into, me and Evo. But Jan, if you want to join for that one as well, feel free. And then we'll just. But we can, maybe if we have some time afterwards, we'll talk more about this. Is that Maven archetype project? Is that the one?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, but I wanted to talk about.
Here, I'll bring it up.
Yeah, you have to do that because.
Okay, let me.
Looks like I.
Okay, so this is. I'll type this into the comments as well, in the YouTube comments. If you're on anywhere outside of YouTube, I apologize. You can start following me on my channel. Subscribe on my channel. So if you want to start watching these on YouTube, and that's the only place I can unfortunately respond. Okay.
Yeah,
so
I wanted to mention the JDBC example that I have here. I also have a PR in Trino to add this as just an example connector.
Okay.
So we said that Trino is so easy to extend, and we have an example connector in Trino, but it's like a simple connector that makes an HTTP request and downloads I think a CSV file, and allows to return it as a table. I created this JDBC example because sometimes people come to our Trino Slack and ask about creating JDBC connectors.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to see how different it's going to be from the most basic connector. Because I know we have this base JDBC class in Trino that we can use as a base for a new connector, so we don't have to implement everything that's required from a connector.
Yeah,
and it's just so super simple. I mean, like you saw that there are just 3 classes, and basically, like the most work for JDBC connectors go into doing proper type mapping, because the data source you're connecting to probably has a slightly different data types than Trino.
Yeah.
So you have to either do some type conversion, but that means either losing precision or the worst thing is with precision. So like you either have wider precision in the other data source or more narrow precision, and you have to check. Do some checks to avoid data loss, to either do some truncation or rounding, or just do checks to avoid data loss. And like this is the most complicated thing.
Yeah.
But if you don't want to do this, I have some examples here. So you basically can create a connector and just drop in your JDBC driver, and that's it. You will have the basic data types working out of the box.
Wow.
It might you can start playing around with it. That's my point. So
why don't we do this then? In future installments, why don't we just take a couple of these Trino Tuesdays to start building out a connector for some JDBC connector? I don't know.
We can try with SQLite. I think that.
SQLite.
yeah, just to see if it's going to work, and like find some example databases and see where it's going to start failing, like with what data types it's going to start failing, and what we can do with it. Like, it's not going to be useful for anything, because like you just should use SQLite for this. Like, you don't need Trino. But it's just an exercise with JDBC connectors in Trino.
Perfect. Yeah, and what we'll do is we'll go through and we'll use your Maven archetype example, and for me to build it up. It's been a while since I touched code, so this will be also very good for me as well. And yeah, why don't we start doing that? So next week, I already talked to Ivo. He's gonna join us, and Jan, if you want to join as well, or we're gonna do another code review, and then we can just do a little chat. But then I think after that, let's dedicate a couple of these moving forward to basically just start working on an example thing. Let me see. So Evo's all on board. So yeah, so Evo, we'll figure out a PR to do next week, and then we'll just have a random chat. We can even keep discussing some of these cool Maven archetype things, and also other pieces like Lone Bunny that Jan and I are working on. But then the weeks after, Jan and let's start working on basically getting this. Let's work on getting this SQLite as an initial example. Hopefully, it will just be what you say, where it's mostly just dropping things in. But I want to go through the whole. I want to go through this whole exercise of like building your own connector, and even like maybe doing a bit of a, like, as we go through a code review, showing people the different parts of the SPI that they would need to do if they're wanting to even branch outside of JDBC. But eventually, I think we should do that as well at some point. But at first, I think JDBC gives us a lot for free, right? So so we'll go into more details like that, and we'll make it a bit of a series that we build on, and have a couple of videos dedicated to that, and particularly showing how to use this archetype, especially if we get that added in to the official repo at some point. That will be super cool to have already some enablement on how to use it.
Yep. I'm trying to finish setting up my GPG key so I can finally publish some artifacts to Maven Central. And this is required for anyone to be able to use my archetype to actually start a new project without having to build the archetype locally first,
locally on their own.
It's probably very annoying.
Yeah, which I mean, but it happens, right? And so that way they can basically just in an IDE have it go out to the Maven Central server, pull down the archetype that you've built already, and you basically just get the build artifacts.
It would run as a Maven plugin, so like it's a Maven command that you need to type, and it just creates a new project directory for you, which you can then open in an IDE and start coding.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so let's do it. And then also, I guess Ivo, you weren't talking about next week. You were talking about pulling together this JDBC connector. So yeah, let's do it. I'm excited, and we'll come back to you then in a week with another PR, and then we'll start dedicating a little bit of this time to focus on setting up the what's it called? the JDBC connector examples, and after that, maybe even try another one from scratch to kind of get us a little more into the weeds of I remember specifically. Actually, another one that we could do. What if we did cockroach? So that was one that Manfred was actually going to do, and it's actually very. We could. Well, how about this? We'll start out with a SQLite, and then we'll go to Cockroach later, because I think Cockroach is actually a cool one that people might actually want and use. So we can just kind of start playing around with a couple of these and see if any of them materialize to valuable plugins. But yeah, we definitely in general should just start showing people how to like generate and make their own plugins, because I think that's a huge value add that Trino has that like people definitely want to start taking advantage of. So cool. All right. Well, we'll see you all then in next week in the next Trino Tuesday. And until then, have a great rest of your week. See you, Jan.
Thanks. Bye-bye.